Thank you so much for staying with us. Well, on that previous conversation, we received this email from Fatima Kazim, who says, please inform the government that they need to do the following to secure the schools. 1, construct a 7-foot high fence around all schools. Number 1. 2, the fences should be gated with armed guards guarding the entrance. 3, install CCTV all around the school. 4, please, prevention is better than cure. I live abroad and can see my house in Lagos 24 hours. The video will alert me immediately anyone comes through the gate, even my security guard. These children are not mine, but I have not been able to sleep well since they were taken. All these are the only way all schools where I live have all... These are the only way. All schools where I live have all of these gadgets. Government, you have been notified.
Indeed.
Now, to the climate conversation we're going to have, from the rising water levels threatening our coastal communities in Lagos to the advancing signs of the Sahel in the north, we find ourselves as a nation on the front lines of a global crisis. The warning signs from the earth are no longer distant predictions. They are happening right outside our windows. But today is not just about highlighting the damage, it's about immediate local action. And we'll be having a gentleman join us for this conversation this morning, because one thing that bothers me about this, Joker, is that we talk about climate action, we talk about climate change, and it sounds very, very sophisticated. But the people that are feeling the impact, they don't even know that there is a disease out there.
Just like we'll be feeling the impact during the World Cup.
Hey, oh, well, we'll talk about that one some other time.
No, because that's one of the conversations the UN is having. The heat may be affecting, you know...
Several, of course,
yeah,
definitely.
So, I mean, it's a serious concern.
Chinonso Agbo joins us this morning. He is the climate advisor for PACE program. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want us to believe that you are in the village or some...
It's somewhere in the garden.
No, this is just...
Okay. No. You know, when we spoke about this yesterday... Okay, well, I understand that Desmond Majakodumi has also joined us. He's also in the natural park somewhere, Lufasi Nature Park founder. Thank you for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I know you live in your bush, so we understand. Thank you for joining us. But let me come back to you, Mr. Agbo. Many times, and I think you know, Mr. Bajakodumi would love to answer the same question. Many times when we talk about climate action, we talk about the environment. They sound highly sophisticated, like highly sophisticated language, but to a large number of people who feel the impact directly, it's just talk. How do we bring this issue home to the people? In fact, I dare say that, I mean, you will probably be able to, you know, advise us, because when we talk about the climate, what exactly is happening and how come people are feeling it and they don't even know?
Thank you so much. So just for context, when we say climate change, so that's an average change in, you know, in climate over a long period of time, let's say 20, 30 years. That particular average determines how, you know, new seasons, you know, are interpreted or are perceived or are experienced, you know, across each country. For example, let's use Nigeria in terms of how we experience these changes. So an average farmer, for example, would see, okay, there seems to be a disruption in terms of rainfall season, okay. Then maybe the intensity of the rainfall, for example. You also see cessation of rain, either early or late, okay, depending on where you know, the particular farmer is located. So if the farmer is located up north, you will likely experience this particular cessation earlier than it should. And then if you are down south, you are likely going to experience this rainfall with higher intensity than it should be. So they are already experiencing it. So in the dry season, for example, we are seeing very extreme temperatures, very extreme heat waves, across different geopolitical zones. So it's already a day-to-day kind of experience. So the average woman that is selling vegetable in the market would see her vegetable rotten faster than it used to be. Someone who is raising poultry would need to provide water sprinklers, additional costs. So these are things that even down to people, in terms of, let's say, infrastructure development or road construction. So you construct your road, you see very high heat, for example, you see the roads, the colters having what looks like bridges across them. So that shows you that we are experiencing this across board. So the driver who is transporting is experiencing it. The farmer who is also, farming is also experiencing it. The person that is raising livestock is experiencing it. So it's something we are experiencing across board. So it's not like isolated to maybe only those in rural communities, even those in urban centers where you have to spend extra amount in terms of energy bill to cool your houses when we have this extreme heat temperature. So it's experienced across board, but you just now down the interpretation to be able to say, okay, the reason why we are having this experience is because of climate change, and just to maybe leave it at that as well. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Majakudumi, thank you for that, Mr. Wu. Mr. Majakudumi, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, particularly because, thankfully, every time we call, that you should have this conversation around the environment with us, you are always there. But I'm not sure that the people that are supposed to benefit from the advocacy really even understand what is going on. What are your thoughts?
This is the big challenge, and as our brother did clearly explain, the information is out there, but there's a challenge, and that challenge goes back into the neglect of education, into the basic system, so that people don't understand fundamental things. There was a time a couple of decades ago when we were doing a documentary on climate change, and we went to the market woman, who's hard-working, boisterous, good woman. And we said, okay, madam, we want to discuss with you about this climate change that has been caused by carbon dioxide. She just looked at us and said, carbon kidney, and I don't blame her for that. I blame a system that has, in certain ways, capitalized on non-education of its people, capitalized on weaponizing poverty. However, it's coming back to everybody, because the reality is the severity of this climate change that is caused by global warming is rapidly increasing on an exponential level. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 120, it's bouncing on us. And it's reaching a level where the scientists have categorically warned us, if we go too far with this massive amounts of polluting the atmosphere, hundreds of millions of tons of these greenhouse gases, particularly carbon kidney, that is the carbon monoxide or methane. If we go too far, we are going to create a situation where we will be unable to reverse the process, because we will have triggered off aspects of nature, like the giant forest that has been sucking this carbon dioxide in for thousands of years, the ice caps that has been reflecting the heat for hundreds of thousands of years. We will trigger off a situation where both these entities will now become entities that are bringing more heat, because the forests are dying back because of the global warming, the ice caps are melting, so less reflection. We're reaching a very, very dangerous point in our evolution as human beings. And we need to get this across through the education system, through the media system, through any system that is viable for getting information across, even the entertainment industry. And I'm glad to say that a young man by the name of Made Kuti, Fela's grandson, he came to our Lufasi Park and he said he was so inspired that he is now writing lyrics for a song that will encourage people and create awareness about the utmost need to preserve nature. My question to you, you feel slap your mama?
Thank you for that, Mr. Badekudunu. Mr. Agbo, if I could come back to you. Some of these solutions that you suggest, you have a background that focuses heavily on climate, enabling social and economic transitions towards, climate neutrality. Nigeria faces a massive gap in funding its climate goals. How can we make, subnational governments now be more involved in this and the subnational green projects commercially viable to attract international climate finance so that we can tackle some of these issues that Mr. Madekudunu just spoke about, at least on this side of the world?
Okay, thank you so much for that. Maybe I'll start by, first of all, building on his very, the fantastic background that he laid. Across the country, for example, we've lost about 1.3 million hectares in terms of our forests cover between 2000 and now, which is like a 13% decline from what it was before, all right? Releasing millions of emissions into the atmosphere. Now from the work we do at PACE, which is Partnership for Agile Governance and Climate Engagement, which is a UK government-funded program, we are focusing on two key things. One is system strengthening, and the second one is mobilizing finance. Why? Because the current NDC, for example, have projected that for us to implement the NDC, we are looking at a funding, a portfolio of around over $300 billion. And that is expected to, support the key targets that have been set in the current NDC. And the beautiful thing about the current NDC is that it's now an economy-wide NDC, capturing, the other sections of the economy like biodiversity and all of that. For example, we are looking at a target of about, 100%, electricity access, and then we're looking at about 50% of that coming from, renewables, okay, which is like having that 50% in the, in the energy mix. But the funding, we have a huge funding gap, which is where PACE activity comes in terms of system, strengthening, and then how to mobilize that climate finance. So what we did last year in terms of not just discussing only the problems, but to see how can we begin to solve those core problems, is that we developed a unique, product, which is access to, a guide to accessing climate finance. And then we also have another toolkit, which we now developed to now use to assess the readiness of institutions like, subnationals and then private sectors on, their readiness to accessing this finance. So we know that there is a gap of over, 270 billion, because if you look at that projection, 80% of that will come from international financing. So now that we are here, how do we finance the targets that we have set? So that is where our work comes in. So we have been able to deploy this particular toolkit to about 20 states. So having conversations with, the top, policymakers in the states, all right, looking at various 6 pillars in terms of what is required for us to access finance. Because we are talking about accessing the finance will need to come into a system that has capacity to absorb it and also deploy it towards what it is intended to achieve. So not just to talk about the need for the finance, but the capacity to get this finance and then being able to now deploy it to what we want to achieve. So now that we have developed this particular tool, we've already also deployed it. We're now taking additional steps to support states to develop their climate change policy. So when you have a clear policy that sets a clear target, we now took it a step further to support those states again to develop their climate change policy and then in the implementation plan itself. So you have a clear roadmap, sector by sector, clear targets, clear plan in terms of how to now achieve that. We're also supporting some states in terms of how can you now institutionalize this, because if you have these targets, you will also need a bill or a law that can secure the investors' interest when these resources come in. So we are looking at how do we strengthen the system. So we are speaking to the investment hubs of the state. That's the investment arm of the state. We are looking at the budgets. We are looking at finance. We're also looking at how can states themselves also have certain budgets allocated specifically for climate action, so that you are also putting your mouth now. You are not just talking about it, but you're also putting action, on the ground. So this is also my own commitment to what I'm doing. And I can tell you that we are seeing significant results for states that have absorbed, and adopted these reform actions, which is part of the outcome of, the readiness assessment. So you assess yourself using the tools, you see where the gaps are. You now develop recommendations in terms of this is how we can come out of this specific gap. So we're not just talking about it, we are taking it step by step, just to also ensure that while we understand that the gaps exist, we're also taking critical steps to also, bridge that gap, by strengthening the institutions, by strengthening the, the private sector players, by bringing that very strong coalition, that conversation, by bringing people around the table to have that important
Mr. Agwe, just 1 second.
Sure.
Perhaps one of the challenges we have here is the language of communication. And by language, I'm sure you know, I'm not talking about a professor speaking to people. The language, how we make the... Okay, you heard, Mr. Maja Kurumi talk about carbon guinea. I mean, I'm sure you understand, what that means. I mean, these people have not the faintest idea of how these things come, how their lives are directly affected. I've given this example before. I have been to my hometown and places that were actually actively boisterous are no longer as boisterous as they used to be. And the environments are, even in the villages, are getting largely abandoned and consequently exploited by those who know the consequences, of what their actions are, because they don't live there. The people who live there are the ones that are vulnerable. How do we encourage the people in those towns, in those vulnerable communities that Mr. Maja Kurumi has spoken about, to see it? I understand the partnerships and all those things, the state governments and the responsibilities that they have, but then the people themselves need to get the information. For anyone watching us now, what are the conversations that you think they should be sending home to their people so that they, from that point, can begin to prevent what they need to?
Okay, thank you so much. Again, because part of what we do is we use a whole of society approach. A whole of society approach means that we are trying to leave no one behind in the conversation. So we are not just like talking to the state governments alone, but the vulnerable communities who are also being affected directly are also part of that specific conversation. So one is that we are, seeing how best we can simplify, this communication. Like when we're developing the NDC, part of the targets there is, climate education. All right, and different propositions came in, just like Mr. Maja was speaking earlier, integrating that into our primary, secondary school curriculum. Okay, and we've already piloted some of these where you have, for example, a young child plants a tree, owns the tree, all right, more like adopts the tree now, all right, and then that child is caring for this tree, is watering this tree, and then when they get back home, they're able to let the parents know this thing that we're experiencing in the farm, for example, this is why it is. So now it is now being translated in local language. So we're not speaking, language that are high end there, but translated in local languages that is easier for the man or woman who is not highly educated to understand it. And then what we've also done is to move it from abstract communication to everyday life experience, just like I experienced earlier. You say, Mama, do you know why your vegetable is rotten, faster than, okay, it's because of this, so it's because of that. So when we have that kind of day-to-day translation in terms of this is why we are experiencing this, then it makes it easier for people to understand. So why is the rain not coming as it used to be? Why is the intensity so much? Why is the wind, the way? They say it's because of that tree we are cutting. We are telling you not to cut the tree. Now you've cut all the tree, and then, there's no windbreak, nothing to wage the wind again. So when you communicate that, converting it from abstract, communication to their everyday experience, and then also how the action of the local person is also contributing to, the impact of climate change, especially the local impact, then it makes sense. Like, for example, when I traveled to Taraba, they were complaining that their rivers are drying up. What caused it? Deforestation. Why is that? Because when you cut the trees are not just acting as windbreaks, but they're also increasing water, infiltration during rainfall, thereby reducing the silting of the rivers. So you say, oh, this river used to be here, or it doesn't dry up during dry season, but now once the rain stops, after like a month, the river dries up. Why? Because there's a lot of silt in the river, so the capacity of that river bank, that channel, to carry higher volume of water is no more there. And then there is no resources to also do the silting, like we also know, to clear up the channels and all of that. So when we now said, okay, it is because of the fact that you've removed all the trees. Okay, let's take a walk. We took a walk towards the river bank. All the trees there to about more than 100 kilometers are cut. So if you are standing, you can see end to end. All right. So I said, this is the reason why. So now they are understanding that, okay, even our own local action has effect. So there's a limit to what the government can do, but there's also, a direct effect of also what the people can do. So when we have that translation to everyday experience, then it makes a little sense. For example, if you also want to talk about maybe moving from dirty fuels to clean fuels, for example, clean cooking, and now you are bringing the picture, you are now communicating to the women to say, okay, there's a need for us to move from this old-fashioned way of cooking to this newer, cleaner fashion. We are now relating it to their health. So someone they know is coughing, someone they know. So by the time you communicate that clearly, it makes it easier for them to understand. Then you design this technology in a way that it is culturally adaptive. All right, it makes it is culturally also accepted. All right, it fits into the local cultural context, and that way you have a local champion who can help further promote and advocate for this adoption of this specific technology. So we must bring it down to the everyday experience, and the communication has to be simple. We did it, for example, where if you go to hospitals, maybe primary health care centers, maybe look on the wall, you will see the description, little charts that anybody can look at and understand what it means. So those simple communication, those simple translation, local translation, is actually what we need if we need to drive the kind of local action we are also looking at.
For that, Mr. Maje Kudumi, speaking about everyday experience, and I want to talk about the role of everyday people in this climate issue. You often describe humans as you often refer to humans as needing to be better creation carers, and we do know that a lot of people also contribute greatly to increasing the effects of what climate is already doing, like indiscriminate dumping of refuse, building houses along water channels, a situation that government is always fighting, and what have you using all these are disposable things, non-degradable disposable materials that we use every day, and then we still dump it, and it's not, those things do not disintegrate. So what is your campaign like in driving the renewal of minds of people to ensure that we do better by nature? Mr. Abu just talked about making creating simple language for people to understand. So how are you driving this campaign? What are the things that you are doing, and what suggestions are you making even for government to be able to educate people about these dangers?
Absolutely, it's multifaceted, and I love the grassroots campaign that my brother there has been doing, especially they adopt a tree, get the young people to adopt a tree, but they should be careful, because I adopted 3 okpekpe trees, and you know, they were my children, young little seedlings. 10, 15 years later, those trees, they had the audacity to grow almost 25 times my height. Can you imagine? But I still love them. I tell you, my Peking grew 25 times bigger than me. But you know, we need to really just really have that very radical transformation of our minds. We need to have this renewal process, because unfortunately for us, and particularly our children, the attitudes that we've had, and I'm not just talking about Nigerians or Africans, this is a global Homo sapien issue. Our attitude has been far too abusive, aggressive, destructive, driven by pride, greed, addiction to sense gratification. Got to do more, have more, have more. And in the old days, it wasn't quite as self-destructive. We came into a realization of a turning point somewhere just at the end of the Second World War, when atomic energy was used for weaponry, the nuclear bombs. Boom! You drop a bomb in, God forbid, in Aja, and people in Victoria Island end up being wiped out. And the United Nations, they advocated a program some decades after that, when the proliferation of the nuclear armament was going too much. They called it MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. That is, if we continue going down this road of massive proliferation of these nuclear armaments and we trigger off a battle amongst ourselves, we will just destroy ourselves. So basically, this is the point we have now reached with our destruction of nature, which is our total life support system, you know, everything that we need, from the oxygen to the water to the food, etc. It comes from nature. And the harsh reality is that nature is giving it back. This is the law of the universe. Every action begets a reaction. Whatsoever you sow, you reap. And I do feel that we need to really try to get this advocacy coming from the pulpits, from the different church denominations, from the different mosques, from the leaders of those places. Because it's very, very clear in both their scriptures that we are designated as stewards of creation, caliphs. Very, very clear. And we need to get a lot more of the pastors, the bishops, the imams advocating this from the pulpit as an expression of the fundamental of their religion, which is peace be unto you. Love your neighbor. And how can you be advocating peace unto people? How can you be professing to be loving your neighbor when you're busy destroying their very life support system, which is causing tremendous amounts of cancer outbreaks? Do you know the amount of people that died prematurely from air pollution that is being caused specifically by the burning of fossil fuel? Just Google it up. Minimum of 3 million people every year. Oh, and that's not to mention what the other side effects are by this disruption of the climate, and you have these massive, massive rainfall, what they call now the rain bombs, that will just flood out an area, hundreds of vulnerable people just wiped out immediately, and not to mention the droughts and so on. So we need to now have a very radical change of our attitudes, and this is one of the major ideologies and admonitions of the religious groups, that we need to to change our ways. And now it's become so urgent and so necessary because nature is beginning to fight back. We haven't provoked her enough over the next 20, 30, 40 years. If we continue to do this, as I alluded to earlier, the climate change will increase very, very rapidly and systems will break down. Lagos will be the whole coast of our country. The whole coastal areas from Lagos to Ondo to Calabar, all these areas, they'll go underwater. You won't be able to stop it. You can put as many boulders as you want, but the massive amount of ocean rise with the increase of energy of the waves, God forbid, we haven't reached there yet. And if we change our attitudes, we shall surely prevent this from happening, and we shall make the world a better place for you and for me and the entire human race.
Sounds like you have
My dear people, we've got to do that.
It sounds like you watched the movie Michael already, but don't answer that yet.
I almost thought Mr. Majekodunmi was on the pulpit there when
Oh, right. I mean, that's him. The environment is his pulpit. I assure you that. Well, Mr. Abu, your last comment on this, but particularly with a particular emphasis on the theme of the World Environment Day for this year, now for climate, in 30 seconds.
I think I would start by saying this. 2 out of every 3 Nigerians is under 25. Okay, we're looking at about 63% of the population. So every action we take is action for the future. So 2 things are there. It's either we are handing over solution or we are handing over crisis to this young generation that is coming up. So we must make take that critical step. And I think we're already making those significant efforts. So the policies and frameworks that we have been able to set in place must be translated to action that is reaching the grassroots. So every single person from the federal government, the state government, the local government, the councillors and the local chiefs, just like my brother also mentioned here, those from the pulpit, we must all speak one language. Okay. So we cannot, in a way, trying to, because we want to, industrialize or develop, at the same time, kill nature, kill what would sustain the future. So, the young generation arrives at that future and there's nothing to sustain them. So I think it is something for us to think about, and then also expedite the things we have already committed to do in our NDC. So the earlier we have that achieved, the better things will likely, become for the next generation.
It's also worth mentioning that what Mr. Majekodunmi said about education. Yeah. It's not just the older people that have to bequeath this future to the young people that you're talking about, Mr. Agbo. We have to educate the young people themselves to know that they have a responsibility to protect their own future as well. But thank you so much for your comments this morning. Chinonso Agbo is a climate advisor for the PACE program, as well as Desmond Majekodunmi, founder, Lufasi National Park. I promise you, I will not slap my mama. Besides, it's too late. She's dead. Oh. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Truly appreciate your comments and thoughts. So, don't look at me like that. I'm just being honest. Okay, when we return, I want to talk about Nigeria's justice system. It's sad that even legal practitioners have issues with that. That and a number of other things when we return.